And what is going on, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of the Designated Players and MLS podcast. We are here with Brad from Cincy Soccer Talk and talking tactics with Coach Gough. Brad, how you doing?
I'm doing fantastic. Really excited to come on and preview FC Cincinnati season with you guys. I love your work. So this is good. It's gonna be a fun conversation.
Yeah, I sure hope so. I'm really excited. It's not often you find somebody else who kind of looks at tactics the way that we do here. So I don't know. I don't know if we'll get a chance to go super deep into some of those today, but we might have to get back together sometime in the future and analyze some things from a tactical point of view. But super happy you're here. I really appreciate you taking the time. I'm also here with Connor. Connor, how are you doing?
Yeah, why didn't you say you were super happy that I was here as well?
Because I see you too much. I've seen you like 8 times in the last 2 days. It's too much. All right. Well, we're here to talk FC Cincinnati's 2024 season, a year out of the Supporters Shield. Lots of changes, lots of different things to talk about. But before we do any of that, as we always do, we got to talk about Scarf of the Week because it's 208 episodes in. I mean, we can't just change now. Throw it over to Brad to talk maybe about some of the ones that he's got behind him there. Very nice.
Yeah, I'm gonna rotate here. One of my favorites here is this old school. You can't really see it too well, but it's a National Soccer Coaches Association of America. Now the organization doesn't exist. First soccer scarf, proper scarf I ever owned when I very first got into coaching high school. I convinced the high school to send me down to one of their little symposiums that the NSCAA was having, and I won it in a raffle or something. So I thought I was a big shot as, like an early 20 something at this NSCAA coaches convention with all these veterans and walking around with my scarf. So that's what I'm going to highlight this week.
Absolutely love that. That is such a good story. I wish I would get chances to go out and do some of those myself, but unfortunately, Alfred's budget to send us places is about the same as my budget for food every week on my graduate assistant stipend. So not so much just yet, but we'll get there. Connor, what are you rocking?
Man, I can only imagine you know which one I'm rocking. If we're talking FCC, I'm gonna bring out my FCC scarf. I just want to make sure this isn't upside down or backwards. From their inaugural season 2019, although I'm sure that's a year that many FCC fans may want to forget.
Right there.
Yes,
Never forget.
I know you got that one.
Never forget, because we got to remember where we came so that we don't suffer as much when we don't get back to the highest heights.
Fair enough.
Always remember your first. I we were talking about before we started the recording. I was in Lexington. I made a lot of trips up to Cincinnati for games. One of the things I like to do when I go out to the stadium is grab a scarf. Away day scarf is one of my favorites. And when we talk about favorite scarves, I think this one takes the cake. It is an FC Cincinnati, and on the other side of it is the 513 Wiener Dog race. Fun story is when I bought this, had no idea this side existed. They showed FC Cincinnati. I'm like, you know what? It's good material. It's unique. It's got, it's not the same old like, oh, it's just stripes and whatever. And then I brought it home and I turned it around. I'm like, I showed it off on the podcast. And I think Connor pointed out, he's like, what is the 513? And I didn't even know they existed. I'm like, oh my God, they're Wiener Dogs. Greatest thing ever. Easily a top 3 scarf in the collection. So really happy I get to show it off today. Ooh, knocked over the mic. All right. So let's talk about where we're at in 2024 with FC Cincinnati. Pat Noonan is taking over, again, the Supporters Shield winning side as they look to build off a wonderful campaign. First in the East, first overall, 69 points, 20 wins, 5 losses, 9 draws. They did get knocked out in the conference finals, but they won the Supporters Shield. And to all of us in the podcast, including Connor, no matter what he says, we are Shield truthers. So congratulations to you on winning the most important title in American soccer. The other side of this is that it was right after you guys had won back to back wooden spoons. What was that like going from 3 straight seasons of very not so good to being the best of the best?
Well, there was a season 4 in there where FC Cincinnati made the playoffs and, went, and I feel like they knocked out some team in red and black. I can't really remember. It's a little bit fuzzy,
Me either. I
but
don't
then
think it
lost to
happened.
Philadelphia. So it wasn't straight, but it was a meteoric rise. And I'm telling you, as a person who's been there from the beginning, as an organization, Cincinnati Soccer Talk, that's been covering this team since before they officially existed, it was wild. I don't think any of us believed it was happening. We were all predicting, even last year in their Supporters Shield winning season, I think I predicted like a 5th or a 6th place finish. I don't think anybody saw that kind of success coming so quickly.
Yeah, and I'll tell you from our side as well. No, we predict pretty much the same thing if I remember correctly. Somewhere in the 5-6, get in. Maybe make a wave here or there, but for the most part, nothing crazy. But the you mentioned meteoric rise is a great way to put it. I think it's probably good to talk about the changes that have been made now. You go from a supporter shield winning side, people take notice. Players have come in, players have gone out, but I think it's probably important maybe to talk about the good first before we talk about the departures. A couple of big names that have come in so far, in your opinion. Best addition, I think it's a little obvious, but I'll let maybe you can share something else outside of it. I don't know. We'll see.
Yeah, I mean, I'm the kind of person, and if you ever hear my podcast, you'll know this. I record with Justin Hoyt, former FC Cincinnati and Arsenal player, and I'm always picking the least obvious because he is always jumping in and the low hanging fruit. So obviously, Miles Robinson, a huge addition, but I'm going to go with a guy who has not even been officially announced yet, in Pavel Bucha from Victoria Pilsenia, 25-year-old midfielder coming in to take up presumably Junior Moreno's minutes, but is so just solid on the ball, really good at ball progression. He's a box-to-box midfielder, and I think the reason why he's going to be such a huge addition is because he's going to allow Obi Wobodo playing the 6 to really get around and get into tackles, and kind of sit back defensively, because Bucha can do the work offensively that Junior Moreno really wasn't set up to do. So last year, really, Obi played more as a number 8. He got forward quite a bit because Junior Moreno, a little bit older, not really great offensively, really good on the ball, just moving it side to side, but not really good advancing or creating shots. So Obi did some of that work. With Pavel Bucha in, Obi is going to be able to just sit back, protect Miles Robinson and Matt Miazga and whoever else is back there. And I just love that as an addition. I can't wait to see have that announcement become official so I can start singing his praises even more.
Awesome. Yeah, we love ourselves a destroying ball winning number 6 here, and to see Nwobodo go back to that properly will be really nice. Connor, your biggest addition.
You could just skip me. I don't want to talk about it.
Oh, we didn't mention this, did we? I don't
Didn't
think we
mention
did.
what?
Your allegiances.
Oh yeah, I'm an Atlanta fan. I think that might be obvious at this point, but yeah, the biggest addition is Miles Robinson, I guess. Um, yeah, it pains me to talk about it, but I will. I just think that FCC's ability to convince him not to go to Europe and to bring him in on a non-DP deal feels like they must have blackmailed him or something. I'm not totally sure. I don't have the inside information, but that is quite the magic that they pulled off there. It's an unbelievable get, and he'll be a great Mosquera replacement to partner with Matt Miazga, and he'll keep that back line very difficult to get past. The one thing I will say though is I do feel like, and maybe this was just a product of the Atlanta system, I feel like Miles Robinson in Atlanta and in MLS was a different beast than Miles Robinson with the USMNT. I feel like he was a better USMNT player than he was with Atlanta. Again, that may have been the system. Atlanta has just never really been known for being very defensive, and there's not a ton of help in front of him in the midfield like he'll have with FCC and Nwobodo. But he wasn't like what's the right word? He wasn't immune to the one-off mistakes here and there. And I mean, he still was part of the defense that gave up 53 goals last year for Atlanta, but I'm gonna take it all with a grain of salt, and just kind of assume it's a product of the Atlanta system, considering he is he does play so well with USMNT. So I still think it'll be an unbelievable addition to the side, and I think that because of that addition, the FCC defense is not going to miss a beat.
That is just something I'll echo here. Miles Robinson is the clear one. You mentioned the options that he had and he turned down to get over here was, I don't want to say impressive, because I don't think as many of them were there as soccer Twitter is wanting to believe. But that being said, you've seen people before turn that down to make the jump and bad things happen, whatever. But it's going to be so important for them because they, Mosquera went back and they went back out on loan and what have you. But he was so important to them, and to not have to really worry about that transition. There'll always be little things you have to look for, but to know that you've got an MLS experience, international experience level center back to fill into that spot right away, it has to be super, super calming. So yeah, definitely a clear one there for me.
You sure you don't want to pick Kip Keller and curse him again?
I'm not allowed to speak on Kip Keller. Last time we did these previews, we talked about Austin FC, and I may or may not have mentioned that Kip Keller could be a top 10 center back by the end of the year. And then he played one game and never played again. So for y'all's sake, I won't mention him with any praises for the rest of the day. So, but what I do want to talk about here as we move forward from the additions are the people who have left. There are a lot of people who have there are a lot of moving pieces, players who've gone out the door. And I guess I'll send it over to you, Brad, first. Who do you think is probably the biggest player that you guys have let go or sent out so far? There are a lot of interesting ones here.
Yeah, Andrew, Connor, again, I'm going to leave you guys the easy answers, okay? And I'm going to try to go, not that I don't believe this. I truly believe this is the case. I just think it's not thought about as much, and that is Santi Arias as the right wing back. He just brought a veteran presence to that side of the field opposite Alvaro Barreal. It allowed FC Cincinnati, when he wasn't on the pitch, they had to basically exclusively attack down the left. When he was not fantastic going forward, but he was good enough. He was a good outlet. He received a lot of progressive passes, even if he didn't create a lot of chances from those passes. Also a really good defender, also a veteran presence in the locker room. And probably the biggest reason why I think he might be the biggest loss is there's just nobody to replace him. I mean, you're talking about the right wing back locker room looking at Alvis Powell as the starter and Brett Halsey, who former #1 draft pick, for whatever that means, he can join your Kip Keller in that regard, and has shown a lot of promise, but not a guy who you think is going to come in and be an MLS, even replacement level. You hope he's replacement level, and that's probably close to his ceiling. So I think Santi Arias has just been a huge loss, and they haven't replaced him yet.
Very interesting. Connor, your thoughts there?
I appreciate you leaving the low-hanging fruit for me. I will gladly take that fruit and say Brandon Vasquez. Probably between him and Mosquera for the biggest impact lost by them leaving. But considering they were able to bring in Miles Robinson, I feel like the loss of Mosquera feels less of a loss than losing Brandon Vasquez. And don't get me wrong, I think FCC made the right call to cash in on him while the price was still high. That being said, I still think his impact is 100% going to be missed, especially considering I don't think they've really replaced him yet. I know they brought in Corey Baird, and I think that's maybe a short-term look there, but I also think that that's not exactly a like-for-like replacement for Brandon Vasquez. I think despite the fact that he took a step back last season, I still think he was a really good striker for them, and he's already proving it with Monterrey. With 3 goals in 258 minutes, he is scoring like crazy over there. So maybe last season was just a one-off exception. Granted, it would have been hard to top the season prior with like 18 goals, 8 assists, or whatever crazy stats he put up that season. But I think Baird is a decent player to bring in to help that attack in Vasquez's absence. But I just don't think it's the same style of player as Vasquez. And maybe they'll still be able to make it work. But I just don't think he's the style that Vasquez plays, or quite frankly, just that the quality that Vasquez is. But who knows? Maybe Noonan has something lined up with maybe a slightly different way that they play, just based on the new personnel he's got in the attack.
Yeah, I'm glad I let you go second because I wanted you to take that easy fruit because I know how much you like to take that easy fruit because I myself am one who likes a little bit different. I'm gonna go with an outside shot here, and I will preface this by saying it was before I was doing this, assuming that the roster was final on the day. But I actually listed Junior Moreno as that. We were doing I guess we were doing a top like statistical team and team, ranking players towards the end of last season. Um, I think Junior Moreno is one of the most underrated and undervalued center mids in the entire league last year. And actually, my good buddy is a Venezuelan, so when I mentioned that to him, he got real happy about that because he agrees with me. But just so much of the work that you didn't notice and wasn't appreciated because you had Lucci pulling strings at the 10, you had Nuovo doing all the destroying at that 6-8 role, and then he kind of just floated there in the middle. But I really do think he held a lot of it together. I watched him play against Red Bull a couple times, and I think Red Bull did a really good job of keying in on when to press at him because I don't think he was always expecting it because I think a lot of teams forgot about him. But yeah, I mean, he gave multiple 2,000-minute seasons over the last 2 years. And I think nearly 2,500 last season, and just did the work that moved the ball and held the team around. He did some of the dirty work. He got some goals for you. He was a really good number 8 for you guys. I think you did well to move on from him when you did because you had other people coming through the pipeline. But Junior Moreno was somebody that I have said from the end of last season was one of the most underrated players maybe in the entire league.
Yeah, if I can jump in on that, that's part of why I picked Buka as my, biggest addition is because that replacement, every MLS team, we all know this, needs those solid veteran guys who don't make mistakes, right? Even if they don't show up on the stat sheet, even if they're not talked about in best 11 circles, they just don't screw up and they're out there day in and day out and keeping things organized. And that was Junior Moreno. He is so good positionally. He allowed the center backs to, a young guy in Yerson Mosquera or Ian Murphy to float a little bit and get aggressive in the midfield. And he was always spot on and covering those passing lanes and dropping into the channels. So I do think Buka is going to have his work cut out for him to replace that. I think he will do it, and I think he will add more offense from that position. But I don't think you're wrong on Junior. He is going to be a big miss. I just think, like you said, that replacement level is going to help out a lot.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the other side of that too is even though that replacement that's coming in, Buka is going to be, at a level that we expect him to perform. It still takes time to adjust to a new league, a new country, a new team, a new group of players, a new coach. So that I think you'll feel it really at the beginning of the season. Once he settles in, I think you'll be a lot better. But the beginning of the season, I think, is when you feel that the most. So as we move on here, like we mentioned, a lot of players have been moved on. They've been moved into different teams. They've been let go. That means somebody else is about to step up and take some pressure off of the questions that we've been asking. I was curious from your point of view, who do you think that player to watch is this year that might have a really good breakout year?
This is one where I might take the obvious answer. I don't know. But I racked my brain looking at this roster. And I think the hard thing is the guys that I expect to be good have already kind of broken out. So I think a little bit the player to watch and the breakout player might be separate questions. I think without a doubt, if you surveyed Cincinnati fans, the player to watch, because we just don't know what we're going to get, is going to be Aaron Bupenza. He has all the talent to be a 25 goal scorer in this league, 20 goal scorer. But he also gets in the way sometimes. He also tries too much a lot of the time. So it's going to be really interesting to see. And obviously his off-field issues are basically famous at this point. It's going to be interesting to see if he can settle in and just bang in goals like he is expected to. If he has a slow start, if he has games where he disappears, I think FC Cincinnati, especially without Brandon Vasquez, is going to struggle. But if he really gets his mind right and slots in and is okay playing Robin to Lucho Acosta's Batman, which we're not sure if he's going to be okay with that or not. But if he does, I think that he could really be a Golden Boot contender. So I'm going to really be watching him. And I'll throw out just one other for breakout player. I have no idea, but Marco Angulo, we brought him in last year. FC Cincinnati did, to play in the midfield, and he just was never able to supplant Junior Moreno, who was just too good in there. So he didn't get a lot of minutes. Kid's got a lot of talent. It's his second year being in America. If he settles in, I think that he has the chance to really eat up, and if not fully break out and grab a starting spot, at least be a key contributor off the bench.
That's sneaky. I'm gonna reserve judgment there for a future segment that we're about to finish up here. But I'll go to Connor. Connor, who are you watching this year as a neutral?
It was a little bit tough to find a breakout player just because I feel like it's a really good mix already of a lot of guys that, because I guess maybe they're coming off a supporter shield season, already feel broken out, versus a couple of young guys in the squad that I just don't think are going to get much time in terms of minutes, because I don't think FCC is going to. I think they have it kind of set already who's gonna kind of be rotating around the team a lot. But I ended up going with Marco Angulo as well. I think when he was first brought in last season, I think Andrew and I had pretty high hopes for him. It seemed like a really ambitious signing with a guy with a lot of potential. I definitely think that potential's still there, but to the point that you were making before, didn't get a lot of game time last year. It was hard for him to break into the team. I thought he was gonna get that shot this year, considering that Junior Moreno was gone, but sounds like somebody else is coming in to take that spot, so he may not necessarily get that this year, but maybe it still opens the door for him to get more minutes. I mean, if I would assume if there's injuries that he's probably the next man up if he isn't starting. But even if that's not the case, I still think with how many competitions there are for FC Cincinnati, that there's a good chance that he's going to get minutes. And if he makes the most of those minutes, I think he's got a shot to knock on the door and say that, that second center mid position, obviously depending on what formation they play, um, is his. And he's the guy that partnered with Nwobodo.
I agree with that, Connor. I think, as we mentioned when we talk about that transition period for Buka when he comes in, he might be the guy to fill that role while we wait for there. I'm sure he's probably getting looks at right now. For me, my is less of a breakout player and more of a break up player. And by that I mean break into that next level, similar to the Kip Keller thing we were talking about before. So if I put a curse on this player, it's Connor's fault. I'm sorry.
Try and blame me, sure.
Ian Murphy is somebody I'd like to see take a big step forward in 2024. He had about 1,500 minutes and was really, really high. I think 90th percentile in tackles per 90 last season. But everything else, he kind of just fell by the wayside and wasn't really impactful. And again, that is, from watching that's a system thing. That's playing next to the defensive player of the year and the maybe had an argument for newcomer of the year in Mosquera. But I think it'd be really, really nice to see him take a step up to be just involved more and making an impact more in that position. I think one of the other things that I remember specifically, when I go to games, I take notes in my little notebook. I was kind of flipping through them, and one of the things I noticed was every time the ball got swung out to his side, Red Bull Preston, and he turned the ball over. It was him and Nick Hagwin. They did it on both of those guys, but he turned the ball over and caused a couple of issues, and that was when we were in the playoff game and away when we won the game. You did your big rotation. So I'd like to see him be a little bit more confident on the ball. I'd like to see him be a little bit more influential in the defense. And again, as much as the system allows him to. But I think if he can turn into a really strong player in those senses, you can see him be a 2,500-minute center back into a multi-million-dollar move out somewhere if that's what you're looking to do with him. But that's somebody that I'll be keeping an eye on this year. So
I thought about going with him, but I just wasn't sure if how many minutes he was going to get, assuming if Haglund was going to be starting in the back again, which, I mean, I don't follow FCC enough to know what they're planning to do. And it's a lot of teams are so secretive with preseason. It's a little hard to find some data on how they're lining up in preseason, but I definitely think that's a good shout, assuming that he can maybe be in that back three with Miazga and Robinson, that could be a good combination for him.
Yeah, Connor, I think what's more interesting in that regard, because Nick Hagland will start the season injured, and have to work back into it. I think it's more interesting to see what they'll do with Miles Robinson in that regard, because he traditionally is a left center back, right? And Ian Murphy is a very left-footed player. So, if you assume that reigning defender of the year, Matt Miazga, is going to stay in the middle, one of those guys is going to have to play on the right unless Hagland comes back in and moves Robinson to the left. But you guys can join me on the Ian Murphy hype train, because I've loved him since he came out as a rookie. I think he has high potential to be a line splitting passer of the ball. He shows those nerves on the ball, like you said, Andrew, young kid. But when he does have a minute to pick his head up, he hit some really lovely passes. He's got good speed, good size. So I think he has all the tools. And I think we've seen him progress year over year so far. Got a call up to the national team, granted, January camp, whatever that means. But I think it's kind of known and it's seen that he has the talent. So I'm excited to see what he can do this year as well.
Yeah, I think Troy Lesesne did a really good job of recognizing the danger that he poses when he's got time and space on the ball, and they took it away from him, and it neutralized a lot of what was going forward. So, really enjoyed what just from your point as a tactical point of view, really enjoyed that little battle there, because you actually saw from where we were sitting the players looking, watching, and then everybody's like, okay, wait, and go. Wait, and then okay, if we're not close enough, we're gonna wait and make him recycle, then we're gonna go. But it was quite clear that he's got a dangerous toolbox there. He's got a lot of things in there that could make him get to that next level. So definitely one to watch for sure. What I'd like to ask you in this second to last section here, you're going into the season. What is the one question that you still got, or that you're going to watch throughout the year to see if it progresses?
Yeah, the biggest question I have for this team is how quickly can they gel and do what Pat wants them to do as a full unit. We talked about some of the departures. This team's going to have a minimum of 4 new starters. They're without Vasquez, without Moreno, without Mosquera, and without Santi Arias. Alvaro Barrial's probably, like, we don't even know for sure he'll be back. He's still, on the roster, on the books, so to speak, but he sold his car and his apartment and all his stuff and went to Europe waiting on a transfer, basically. So who knows what his head's going to be like. Aaron Bupenza, we saw that friction he had with Lucho Acosta when he first came in. So I want to see, can this team, actually follow Pat Noonan into the match tactically, and have a cohesive idea of how they're going to play. How will Miles Robinson slot in next to Matt Miazga? Can they play off each other as well as Mosquera and Miazga did, where Mosquera could really go hunting for the ball and Miazga would just kind of sit deep? Or is Miles going to be worried that Matt's going to get beat for pace and want to kind of sit back too? So those, like, that learning of each other and how long that takes, I think could make the difference between another Supporter Shield challenge or like a 3rd or 4th place finish if they get off to a slow start. So that's really what I'm going to be focused on, at least early on.
Nice. Connor, what about you?
My question's kind of related to something I was talking about earlier, but can they still challenge at the top without a true Vasquez replacement? I think Corey Baird can get the job done in some respect, but I don't think they've truly replaced the impact that Vasquez has on the team. And I know that he still had a little bit of a slow year last year, and they were able to still win Supporter Shield, but I'm not so sure without him completely if they would be able to do the same. So that's what I'll be keeping an eye on.
Mine, I mentioned I was reserving judgment on the Bupenza because you hit every point of my one question here, and it was very much can Bupenza carry the load? We mentioned lots of issues reported with his attitude on international duty and goes where he wants to go. You mentioned the friction with star player Lucio Costa, and I have it right down here. He's got all the tools, but can he get them all to work? You mentioned he tried a little bit too hard, a little bit too often. And I also think that the success that he did have was because there were lots of eyes on a lot of other players. And you just mentioned that you're missing, possibly Barreal. You've got Vasquez gone. Lucci's still there, but a lot of the players who they were worried about might not be there next year. So, or definitely are not there next year. So with him being the guy, people are like, this is the guy we need to mark. This is a guy we got to make sure we don't lose him. Will he be able to handle that and still be successful? So that's something that I'm going to look for. And then as we wrap this up here, it's the question of all questions. End of the season. We're getting ready for a playoffs. Where is FCC sitting in the table in the East?
Man, Andrew, this is a question I hate. I hate doing predictions, mostly because as a coach, like, and that's the hat that I wear. I am an FC Cincinnati diehard fan, but I always wear the coach's hat. I don't take one off and put the other on. I put my fan hat on top of my coach hat, so to speak. And as a pragmatist, I just think so many things need to go right for you to finish first or win the Supporters Shield. So I cannot pick that. But yet I look back at my history, and every time I've been asked to make a prediction, I've been like way low. 2 years ago, I picked them, I think 12th or 13th, and they made the playoffs, I think as like a 7 seed. Last year, I think I picked them 6th. They were 1. But as I looked at the table, I just think too many teams have gotten a lot better. I'm worried about a little bit of a slow start. So I am picking them 3rd in the East, with the caveat that that probably means they're at least finishing 2nd, if not having another Supporter Shield run.
Love it. I love that confidence. And I mentioned to you before we started recording Connor's favorite phrase, and you kind of hit it right on the head. So I'm going to send it right over to Connor because I know what's coming in his first statement here.
I won't say it. It's
do
been
it.
too
No,
many
do
times.
it.
No,
do
no,
it.
no, no.
Do it.
I can't do it again. It's every episode that I'm talking about it. Yeah, my phrase is that I think the East is a bloodbath. I think there's so many good teams in the East this year. But I think FCC is one of them, honestly. I don't think they're still at that Supporter Shield level that they were at last year, but I still think this is a very good Eastern Conference team, and I see them finishing somewhere between 3rd and 5th. I think it's likely that they're getting a home playoff game to start. Well, I guess technically everybody gets a home playoff game, but it's likely that I think they'll get maybe 2 home playoff games in the first round with a 3rd or 4th place finish. So I still think they're one of the better teams in the East, even though they've lost a couple of players. I think they've replaced some of them pretty well and still have enough talent on the team and a good system in place to still be right there in the mix.
I am a little bit reserved with this one. So, as already mentioned, it's very tough to repeat in MLS as the best of the best. And then you throw in the fact that you have to do it against mostly Eastern Conference competition. That makes it 10 times harder. I do think FCC regresses back a little bit. I don't see them missing the playoffs. I don't even see them in the play-in games. But I do see them somewhere between 4 and 7. As you mentioned, the slow start. You mentioned everybody. I know, it's brutal. There might
Number
be
one FCC hater right here.
There may be a little bit of cynicism from the last 2 playoff runs. There may be. I'm not lying to you, but I do think that there are a lot of teams here who have made improvements, and I think FCC has as well. But they've also got a couple of question marks in key areas that other teams just I think they have more question marks in key areas than other teams do. So coming in, I think a slow start is definitely possible. I think and with the Champions Cup involved as well, you've got a lot of things to balance. There's always one team that is finishing lower than way expected because of these Champion Cup runs. I think FCC is not outside the realm of possibility of being that side. Do I think it knocks them out of the playoffs? Absolutely not. But do they finish lower and then go on that run late because of all the other things they were trying to deal with first? I think that's a possibility.
I didn't know we were given giant ranges. I'm going to change my answer to they're going to finish between 1 and 5.
Perfect. That's totally cool too. That's not the biggest range we've seen. I think I gave one like a 3 through 9 or something like that. So you're definitely not the biggest range we've seen, but yeah, there's tons of things up in the air. I guess one other question, we haven't really asked this to a lot of the teams yet. How is Champions Cup going to go for you guys? How do you think that's going to run out?
Yeah, that's a super interesting question because of what we talked about with the early season and trying to figure things out and put people together. The word out of camp is that things look really good, but what else is the word going to be? I mean, Bupenza, I think, has scored 3 goals in 2 preseason games, but that's preseason, right? Alvaro Barreal hasn't even shown up to camp yet, and he created so many of their chances. I mean, he was like top 10 in chance creation and all of MLS out of the left wing back position. So that's just going to be a huge piece to try to integrate into that team. Luckily, their first match is against Cavalier, which should be a team that they can handle. And then they probably have to play Monterrey, which I could see them losing to Monterrey in the second round. But if things go well, I could see them going on a bit of a run. I cannot fathom them winning the entire Champions Cup with it being starting so early in the season with the question marks that they have. But last year I couldn't fathom them winning Supporter Shield, and look where we are. So who knows?
I think that's a really good way to clean it up here, because I think that mimics at least my thought process too. I think you are either going to get to the second round and out, or you're going to go on a run, and you don't know what's going to happen after that. So um, at this point, Brad, thank you so much for coming on and chatting FCC with us. This has been great. It's been really nice to chat with somebody who is big into tactics and coaching and things like that as much as I am. It's been cool to see your perspective on that. We want to give you a little bit of time here to plug your podcast and your channels and your socials. So go on and tell the people where to find you.
Yeah, I'm at FC CincySoccerTalk on all the socials, and I comment on a lot of different soccer things, not just FCC, although that's primarily it. My podcast is Talking Tactics with Coach Gough, which is an FC Cincinnati podcast. But like I mentioned, I have former Arsenal player Justin Hoyt on there with me every week, and we talk to some of his friends. We have guests on, and I would say bare minimum, whatever team that you root for when they play FC Cincinnati, maybe download Talking Tactics with Coach Gough the week after, because we get pretty into the weeds with what went on in the game, what each coach was trying to do, which players might be under the radar that kind of stood out. So we have a lot of fun doing it. We break down all the goals, all the things. So if you want to learn more about soccer or tactics, like I think it's a pretty good place to go.
I will absolutely echo that. By the way, it is quite the place for anybody who's really into the way the game is played tactically. They do a really good job of breaking it down at a high level, but at a level you can still understand, regardless of where you're at in your education of the game. So absolutely go check that out. Make sure you go over and subscribe and watch a ton of the tactics, whether it's for your team or any team, because they're always fun to do. But thanks so much again, Brad, for coming on. We really appreciate your time. And at that point, I think we will see everybody on the next episode of the Designated Players and MLS podcast. See ya.